I'm gonna roll the credits, you know. Out there. So we're gonna go over the hazard communication standards, and this one is brand new. You guys are gonna see it more and more. Anyone that's under OSHA that is not a municipality has until December 1st, 2012. That's this December 1st in order for them to do this training with their people. So if they don't have this training with their people and December 2nd comes around, it's a cherry picking time for the compliance officers. It's so easy for them to write this one down. And they're going to. I already talked to a compliance officer in Baton Rouge, and he said that they're prepared on December 2nd to go out and start with their warnings. So they might not cite, it may not cost anything, but at least it gets them in the door. So that's December 1st, 2012, or excuse me, 2013. So if you guys know anybody in general industry or construction, this is what they're going to have to do. So here's your hazard communication. What we're going to do is we're going to describe the communication plan. We're going to describe what the globally harmonized system is, GHS, and then we're going to just go through the regular standard. So if you guys are, you have that hazard communication standard, that's in the 1910 book, 1200. That's the section that's going to be 1200 section. So this .1910.1200. This is the right to know laws. So this screen's telling you about when the right to know laws started in 83, revised in 87. In 94, you had another revision, and now the most major revision is the 2012 that added the GHS system. This is how it works. Let's say you are a chemical manufacturer, and you said my chemical has these hazards associated with it. You have to make sure that whatever the hazards are, starting off this process, you document the hazards, you inform people through labels, through your safety, your MSDS sheets currently, and that's material safety data sheet, and even your representatives, however you go out, your salespeople. So this is my chemical, this is what it does. That starts the hazard communication, and that information gets disseminated to the employers. And the employers now have to implement a plan. If they use your chemicals or any other chemicals in their facility, they have to have a hazard communication plan. So that hazard communication plan starts with the information from the chemical manufacturer. Yeah, just push it against it. See, that's why I got it there. So, you got it.
Well, I'm just not positive to point.
Oh, you get the put in the yeah. So from the employer side, yep.
Well, it's just trying to do green. So it's going.
You were taking pictures. That's the video.
No, I don't.
So that's why I got this in the backup. I could always adjust that. And then, well, geez, I'll do a voiceover. So at least this is going. And so you start with the employer side, and then from the employer side, when they, or say the next step is the employer side, they get that information, and then they have to take it into the employees. And how they do it is their annual training, the initial training. If there's a change in the chemicals that they use, then they're going to have to tell the employees about the chemical manufacturer's warnings for their hazards. So that's your hazard communication plan. And then it also gets on your containers. So let's say your lab, like Jacob said, your lab provides smaller containers for someone else. Whatever the chemical hazards are there, they have to make sure it's labeled correctly. So when it gets to the next person, that they know exactly what they're dealing with. And that's the whole hazard communication, how that works together. Your number one cited general industry standard right here is hazard communication. So it's cited 6,300 times in 2012. And we're about to get new numbers because the fiscal year for the government was up. So when the new numbers come up, this probably might be higher. So $3.5 million worth of penalties just from this one standard in violation in the general industry. Where in construction, it was the fall protection, but general industry was HAZCOM. Number one out of all those sites, a written plan. People don't actually have a written plan. So 1,200 of those citations out of that number before, which was what, 1,600? 1,200 of it was not having a written plan. Having it written down. So you got to do your informal, your information, and your training. That's the other big chunk. And then as it peers down, the last one is your label. People being labeled correctly, the GHS, well, their hazard communication, even before the GHS did not appear. So that is basically how the regulation breaks down. Now, the purpose of it, the scope, and all the definitions, this is how the actual regulation in 1200 is broken down. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each one of these components and we'll talk about it for you guys. Question? Oh. Thank you. I heard. So I'll take a question. So purposes, you're going to make sure that all hazard chemicals that are produced or imported are evaluated and classified. That's the purpose of the standard. So the information now is going to be disseminated and from the employers and to the employees. So first it's classified, or identified, classified, and then disseminated to employers and employees. So these are the people that are covered under the plan, and the employer, the chemical manufacturers, the importers, and the employers are all covered that use the chemicals. And defining the use is anyone that's transporting it, even though they're not actually using the chemicals, they're still transporting that chemical, and that counts as use, because if it's anything happens, and let's say it's in a pickup truck going from one spot to the next, and that truck gets in an accident, you have hazardous chemicals that are exposed, that's a new hazard, and if they don't know how to treat that hazard, then they're under this plan, so they're in a violation state, and then it's also dangerous. So that's why even people who are handling or using or moving the chemicals are under this plan. They have to be trained. So anybody in the trucking industry now falls under the GHS, and I'm not too sure how many trucking manufacturers are training their drivers on HAZCOM. The classification now of hazards is going to be the chemical produced or imported. They're classified as hazards. And here are some of the written communication programs. You're going to have warning labels. You're going to have a new SDS, which is replacing the MSDS, and you have the training. Here are some of the people that it doesn't apply to, because OSHA only applies to the workers, and they don't go over other jurisdictions. So solid waste, they have their own jurisdiction. The CERCLA and the RECRA has their own jurisdiction. Tobacco, there's the administration of the tobacco and firearms to take care of that, and even DOT, Food and Beverage Administration. So OSHA doesn't have jurisdiction over them, so this standard doesn't apply to those people. The cosmetic industry, they have their own entity. They still have to do the GHS, but they're not going to be under the standard because they have their own, the consumer product is cosmetic people. So here's some of your new definitions. Whenever you see HNOC, that's hazards not otherwise classified. And the big ones are the combustible dust, pyrophoric gases, the simple asphyxiants. Those things aren't classified yet. They know they're hazards, they just don't have a specific classification, so it's not going to be on there. And combustible dust, though, is getting close to being defined. You're starting a new standard on that. Chemicals, that's your definition for chemicals. That's your definition for hazardous chemicals. Here's your new containers. You're going to have any container that carries chemical, even if it's boxed up or on the acetylene torches, whatever, you're going to have a new symbol. So you're going to see new labels everywhere. Your packaging is going to be different. Here's a barrel. They're looking at their labels. So this has 3 different symbols on it, and we're going to get a close-up of that. So if you have one that says material safety data sheet or station, just put on a little duct tape for now and until you get a new one that says SDS. You just put a little duct tape over material, and then when you get your new one, you can switch it out.
Good old duct tape.
Good old duct tape, you use it for anything, so now you got it in your safety. So it's a requirement that, for any of the chemical manufacturers and importers have to have all the relevant data for their chemical. And one situation that they had recently is OSHA found out through someone's complaint that the companies that are supplying Brazilian hair straightener, I forgot what they call it, but it's some sort of Brazilian hair straightener. It was all the rage when they were very curly hair. They put the stuff on and it straightens out the hair like magic. It has formaldehyde. And there's a company going out there saying that their product is formaldehyde free, and all their materials are saying formaldehyde free, the safety data sheets. But someone that was using it, the actual techs that were using it, were still complaining of respiratory problems. And it turned out that after testing, there should be some testing, that was not formaldehyde free. It had formaldehyde in it. So they were misrepresenting their chemical on their materials and safety data sheets so they could make sales. On the new GHS system, that'd be a violation, and it's global. So if that's it was coming in from a different country, I wasn't sure where, but that company now will be a violator of the GHS, and they could be shut down. And it's not just coming from America; it's coming from a global entity. And so that's a big plus of this new system. So, anybody going up get their hair waxed, David? You're gonna get that one little bald strand. Get that. Watch out for formaldehyde.
Right.
So there's a whole range of literature. What I'm going to show you here is on the website. OSHA has a website that. This right here is telling you about all the hazard counts. So once you go on OSHA.gov and you type in hazardous communication, this is what's going to get pulled up. They have a wallet card, and it's a small one that will show you some of the requirements. And then we even have a side-by-side comparison. This one here is your side-by-side comparison of your rule. We've got it over here as well. And then they even have a fact sheet, and then they have a downloadable of the new pictograms. And we'll show you what those pictograms look like too. So OSHA has all of that. Good information though. They really they try to make it as easy as possible for the employers to train their employees. So they have very comprehensive information. So just like the video we had yesterday on the physical hazards, that was with the pestle, the guys breaking up the pestle and it blew up. That should be on your SDS sheets. That's going to be classified. So physical hazards are important, and when you go see them, your health hazards, your acute health hazards, your chronic health hazards, that's all going to be there. If there's toxicity to the aquatic life, they'll show you that as well. So here's your flammable liquids. OSHA, right to know, the ANSI rating of EPA, and then DOT, that's your consumer product. So all these, they'll tell you from your flash points, your low to the high flash points, if it's flammable or combustible. If it's on this side, then it's highly flammable versus low probability flammable and combustible. So that's your scale versus your C flash point, the point at where it could explode. So if something has a very low flash point of 2 degrees Celsius, it's highly flammable. And if it has, let's say, 60 degrees where it's going to combust, that's your higher combustible versus your low. So that 93 degrees Celsius, but if you're at 93 degrees Celsius, is an issue. You got more issues than that. So here's your GHS with your flammable liquids. They're taking something extremely flammable here versus something that's highly flammable on this side, and that's showing you your flashpoint rating. That's your flashpoint scale as you saw before, where it's flammable versus combustible. So the GHS kind of stacks the extremely flammable stuff and the highly flammable together, and then it goes to the less flammability. So between 0 to 23, that's where they're stacking the highly flammable and extremely flammable together. So that's where you get your number system. So 1, 2 is highly flammable. 3 or 4 on this side and on the lower scale. And it's doing it from a flashpoint rate basis. So that's how they're getting it. Before I wasn't too sure. This is new to you from the last training I did with you, Chip, because before I knew that the rating scales we're used to seeing 0 to 5, or excuse me, 0 to 4. 0 was very, very low hazard. 4 was very, very high hazard. I wasn't sure exactly what they were doing there, so I found out, and what it is they're counting it by a scale of your flash point. So from the 0 flash point to your 93 degrees Celsius, it's telling you 1 is very extremely flammable versus 2, and even 4 or not. So they stack them together. So that's how they came up with that.
Is this the HMIS rating system that the colors and numbers are for?
The HIMS, I'm not too sure.
I think it's Hazardous Material Information System.
Oh, from the CDC with the system that you'll still use on the Homeland Security system.
I'm not sure about
What you see on your wristband, the tier 2 and tier 1. Yeah, it's
okay, I'm losing it. I'm familiar with the RMP.
If it's the
same.
same.
Different levels of tier how much chemicals you have in your pipe. Where the tiers come
Yeah,
in.
that's the tier 1s and tier 2s, the amounts. And they do give you a scale of what's highly hazardous, and that's the stuff that's on the list of lists. And the way they're classified is similar to this, if that's what you mean. Why they got on the list of lists, they get classified as being highly hazardous through a rating scale like this.
Okay. So this rating scale is applied to the HMIS rating system. Then they figure this out with the number, what color a certain chemical applies to, and then that's how the HMIS system is applied.
Yeah, that's like the older system where you used to see the diamond.
The diamond,
Yeah.
we still have
Yeah.
those close to the
Yeah.
so
That- This is the new change. So this is the advancement of that system. So now we're on the same wavelength. I got you now. Yeah, this is the advancement of that system. And what they did is they saw some of the global community, and together they brought up this type of system. So the one you're talking about has been adjusted to this. So I think I even have a slide for that later. So it just kind of hit me with good. So we got it. So here's your a little bit more of the explanation of your flammability, and it is, on a flashpoint scale. So I'll show you your flammable liquids and vapors in this, your flammable or combustible liquid and vapors are over here. So that's where you're getting it, and that's your new symbol for your flammable. So it has the line under it, but it's not an O in the middle, it's a flame. If you were to see the O in the middle, then it's an oxidizer. But now, before, the flame didn't have a line under it. It was just a flame, only the O with the oxidizer and the flame above it had the line underneath it. So that's changed for you too. And now your signs are going to be different. Danger versus warning. So anything that falls in the high or extremely combustible flammable rate now is going to have a danger rating, and then anything below is going to have a warning. Those are your two buzzwords you're going to have now is danger, warning. And after that, it's going to be followed by a statement of why it's dangerous or there's a warning. So this is how that same thing applies to toxicity. You have a scale here, an LD50 scale. So this one I'll show you guys on the board here. The LD50 scale, they get 100 lab rats together. So if they get 100 lab rats together and they start at a level where whatever chemical it is innocuous, it doesn't matter with the lab rats, everybody's all living and happy. So if that, let's say, is 1 milligrams per liter and there's no kill, then it'll increase the doses to 2. And they'll increase the doses to 3 or whatever range. It may be 2.5 or maybe 2 point whatever. But for the example, we're only going at 1. So here's 4. And then at the top of the range, 5, they may see something. And then here is the time. So on this line, it's whatever time factor. Maybe they're adding it every 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever that time factor is. So if from this point here, they're not seeing anything, but then all of a sudden 50% of their subjects die at this point here, that point right there becomes your LD, your lethal dose. 50, meaning half of their subjects out of 150 of them died. So now your lethal dose here is 4.0 milligrams per liter of whatever that toxic chemical is. So let's say they added a different chemical and same, well, it won't be the same 100 because 50 were gone. So they get 100 new rats. Now they're going to test this new concentration. And all of a sudden that dose response curve goes like this. And let's say that's 2.1, 2.3. The new LD50 is now down here. So 1 is at 4. The other one they just tested is 2.2. This second one is now highly hazardous, more toxic than the first one because your lethal dose now goes down. So that's what it's saying over here with your LD50. The LD50 milligrams per liter, if it falls below 0 and 50, it's highly toxic. If it's above 50 to 500, your toxicity goes down. And then once you go over here, it's harmful. So that's your differentiation of the oral hazard. Now, when you take this from this chart here and you're going to throw it into your rating scale, 0, or we should say 1 because there's no 0 anymore, 1 to 5 being 0 to 5 milligrams, 50, 300, 2,000, 5,000, that's where you get your rating scale. So now this is highly toxic versus something that is not as toxic. So that's why they switched it from 4 being highest to 5 now being the lowest. Fatal is swallowed over here, and then harmful is swallowed over here. So that's the 2 differences. And that's where you get your new symbols for that. This one is telling you it is dangerous, it's going to be death, while the other one is giving you the warning. So the exclamation point saying you have to, there's a warning there. So simple fixing it's anything that's going to displace oxygen, take away your air. So that displacement of oxygen is going to say warning may displace oxygen or cause rapid suffocation. So that's going to be the buzzword for something like that. Your pyrophoric gases is going to say danger because it may spontaneously catch fire if it's exposed to air. And that was the thing that we saw with the first video with the effect that pulled out of the syringe, that gas that boom blew up right there at her. That was a danger. And here is now one that says warning may form combustible dust concentrations in the air. So that's a combustible dust is a warning one. Now here's your components of your hazard communication plan. So you can find that. Let's go to the see the bar. So the 1910, let's do it 1200. Pointing this out so you can highlight it, have it in your tapes. So 1200, we have an actual hazard communication plan. It starts your hazard communication program. And that one starts at 1200 feet. 1200 feet starts your program. And then at H, it starts your training. I've got that on page 715. I've got it already headed. 715 is where you're starting your, or excuse me, 714 is where you're starting your written communication program. So starting from E, 715. Written 715. Mine's different edition, so it's slightly different. So that's the components of your written program. So those are things you should have in your program. And G is telling you exactly what the safety data sheet should say. So when we start with G, that's tells you all about your sections. G2, that tells you all of your sections. And the new safety data sheets, every safety data sheet will have it in that order. So no more now can you have different orders in your safety data sheets. You have to all over that. Here's a picture of your new GHS labels, what it's going to look like. So if you have a label of chemical coming in, they'll have the identifier telling you if it's flammable, if it's hazardous. You're going to see your danger word and your signal word, your new pictogram. So instead of having that one blue where you have the red or the blue, the red was on top, red was your fire, your physical hazards, your white was on the bottom, and yellow was on the other side for your health hazards. That's all down. And in those had a number. So that's all down. Instead, they're going to have many different pictograms. So tell you that, yes, this is a health hazard or this is a flammable product. This one is methanol. So this is a symbol for methanol. Then you have the precaution word. So the precaution statement tells you that it's highly flammable liquid and vapor, causes serious burns to the eyes, and may be harmful to swallowing. So not only are they giving you now a signal word, but then they're giving you a precautionary statement. And then on this end, on the label, is also telling you how you can protect yourself with prevention and whatever response storage options. The danger words, that's what's going to be on your labels. And here are some of your other symbols. So you're going to get used to seeing all these gas under high pressure. You're going to see that on your containers now. Your acetylene or your oxygen. So it's going to have one of these on it. And the oxygen will say oxidized. So you see these two on there for your oxygen. So you get used to seeing that. And it may have another one too. If you're going to use a secondary container, this is where you're going to find that rule, 1200 F6. So that secondary container now has to have a label. So if you know somebody in the labeling business, tell them start making some of these GHS labels, especially if they're local. Make blanks so someone put them on their secondary containers, because there will be some money to be made for being able to have secondary container labels. You got you guys a business now. You'll start making some labels. So you have to have your product identifier, what it is. So you just write that product identifier in a blank and put your word in a blank. So there's a way of doing that. So that is your replacement. Right here, old symbol is your fire and stability. This was special instructions, health, and if you saw this, it had all your information in one. And now you're going to have two. So this is exactly the same chemical, this one and this one, but now that label is your own one as your new label. Benzene you guys have in your green book. You have a SDS of benzene under the hazard communication tab. So this is what benzene used to look like. That label now is changed. Colorless liquid, sweetened odor. So someone thinks this, oh, this smells good. It's like perfume, it smells good. They're killing themselves because the benzene itself is dangerous and it's toxic and it's flammable. So on top of that, if they were to spill it and they're smoking, it could have a flammable effect. So that's benzene. So here's what your secondary container has with some of the labels. This even has a pictograms for your PPE. So the new labeling is going to be completely different. This is what you're talking about, right? The HMIS.
Yeah.
So that's where we got it from before, and that's now we know why it changed from category 1 to 5 versus the other one here. SDSs, I'm gonna put this all up at once. So it has to be in English. So through the global community, we decided that English is going to be a language that's going to be the main staple. So it has to be in English. 16 sections are all mandatory, though OSHA's not going to be able to regulate all 16 because some of it's DOT side and they don't have any kind of jurisdiction over that. But the SDS still have to have 16 sections. There can't be any blank spaces, and it has to be maintained in the workplace, be readily available for employees. So if you have a satellite area where the guys are using toxic chemicals, you need to think about how am I going to make this readily available to them. If it's in a lab, obviously there's a station where they can go grab that, but let's say they're in the field and they're using chemicals or they're transporting chemicals, how are they going to have their SDS available for them? So that might be a thought process you need. You've got that guy that you mentioned that was riding with the car with the acetylene and oxygen. Does he have an SDS with him, an MSDS in his car? So you're going to have to figure out how am I going to make sure these guys have in their work trucks, if they're carrying chemicals with them, how am I going to make sure that they have that information readily available? So that's a thought. Some people go computerized, where if it's on some sort of program and they have a computer system in their truck, they can just pull it up when they need it. Or some people, they may have a set of things that people use all the time, and they just have a section that they put in their vehicle that this is where your MSDS is. But the workers should tell you what they're using on a daily basis, and then from there you tell them, all right, here's your SDS that goes with it. So section 1 is always going to be the same product identifier. Section 2 will tell you about the classification of the hazards. Important one, 4, always going to be your first aid measures. So now you can do your training and you tell the guys, if you don't remember anything about the SDS, remember section 4 is first aid. So they'll know from now on, always go to 4 if you need first aid. If there's a fire, it's always going to be 5. Storage and handling, always going to be there. And the accidental releases. So if you tell them 4, no 4, 6, and then if there's any kind of release, or they can take care of it through 6, the measures of section 6, or if someone needs first aid because of exposing that chemical, then they're going to go to 4. So if they get anything out of your training, let them know that part.
I thought 8 was also good.
Oh yeah, with your handling.
Also what PPE is used.
Yep. Yeah.
Chemical.
Yep, that's a good one too, because, and they, in your, if you look at your section 8 on your benzene, the PPE and the permissible exposure limits, the PELs, they have everything in different languages. I shouldn't say languages, I should say different countries have different readings. So we use parts per million, milligrams per liter. So here, all that section 8s. That's the European, that's Australia, Belgium, this is what they use. So they have a limit value as opposed to a PEL, permissible exposure limit. Italy, they're using something else. We have a US, we have our NIOSH, which is a standard threshold limit. And there's a few other companies that use, or I should say countries that use ours. So that whole section 8 is very big, but section 8.2 in the new SDSs, they have pictograms with your PPE. So that makes it really easy for someone to see, okay, I need respiratory, got a picture of it right there, I need some goggles and body, some sort of splash protection. The training section is fairly easy, because the training section is just like everything else, consistent with all the OSHA plans. Initial training, and then after the initial training, you're going to have remedial training, which is annual, and then you're going to have some training if someone's used in one position and now they're going to be switched into a position that has hazard chemicals. They're going to be retrained. So someone may not be used to going to the lab, and now they're working at the lab. They're going to have to know what the hazards are in that lab. So that's another one of those training. Here's your compliance dates. So December 1st, that's the training for people who are under OSHA, not federal or government. December 1st of this year, rapidly coming away. November's the end of the week, right? So they've got basically this month to keep it full force. And then June 1, 2016 is when all updates, standards have to be updated, because at that point the manufacturers are going to be sending their GHS labels out. So all your HAZCOM has to be updated by that point. And that's your transition period is for everybody from December 2013 to June 2016, got that transition period. So come June 1st, or should say June 2nd, 2016, there'll be a lot of CEOs, compliance officers going out there saying, all right, let's see your hazard communication plan while we're here and doing one of our inspections. And that might be really like December 2nd of this year, if someone is leaving a job and they're very irate about it, and they complain to OSHA saying, "You've never had our GHS training yet," that might be low-hanging fruit for them. And so that is our HAZCOM portion, and you guys learned quite a bit in 40 minutes. So thank you.